Hey everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Sacred Illness Podcast. I'm Dr. Erin, your host, and I will be exploring with you through this episode and all to come how illness is not a roadblock, but rather an invitation to reclaim your true, vibrant self. In this first episode together, I'm going to talk with you about where the inspiration for this podcast came from, what sacred illness means to me, why this is a personal topic to me, and all that you can expect in the episodes to come. So let's delve in. So to begin, who am I and why is this topic something that I wanted to bring in podcast form? So again, my name is Dr. Erin Hayford. I'm a naturopathic doctor and a somatic experiencing practitioner. I started my journey back when I was 20 years old, just about 20 years ago, when I first started getting sick. And when I started getting sick, this was, of course, something that was very shocking to me as a 20-year-old. I was vibrant. I was working on a farm. I didn't know really what I wanted to do with my life, but I was enjoying figuring out the process. I remember this one fateful day when I was working on the farm where I suddenly felt so weak, so tired, so sick that I actually fainted in the middle of the field. And up until that point, I had definitely been having chronic symptoms that were creeping up, becoming more severe, more significant, that I really tried to cover up and ignore. But at that point in time, I was no longer able to hide the fact that I was sick. And so after a series of testing and doctors and all the things that one has to go through in order to get a diagnosis, I was delivered this diagnosis of Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune condition that impacts the gut. And I don't know if it's a combination of me being stubborn or if I was in denial or what, but I refused to accept that the only thing I could do to take care of my illness was to take medications and or get surgery at some point in the future. And so this began my own journey into discovering, exploring, and searching for a holistic alternative answer to my own illness. So to make a long story short, essentially my own healing journey brought me through my educational journey where I studied nutrition, herbal medicine, naturopathic medicine, which eventually got me to this concept of mind-body medicine. And it was through mind-body medicine that I really started to see changes in my own healing journey. I had tried several modalities up until that point: therapists, doctors, different types of body workers, you name it, I tried it. And a lot of those things did help, but nothing helped in the way that I really wanted it to. Nothing helped all the way. And it wasn't until, again, I found this mind-body medicine, understanding this connection between the mind and the body, beginning to understand how the body holds on to things and the body keeps the score, as we know from that Hallmark book by Bessel van der Kolk. The body holds on to things. And what my body was holding on to was lots and lots of years of self-suppression, of not allowing myself to be myself, to express myself for various reasons, traumatic experiences I had had as a child and in young adulthood, and many more things. And it was when I began to work on this mind-body connection and release the things that my body was storing, allowing myself to come into a fuller, more authentic expression of myself, that I really started to see tangible shifts in my physical health, my mental, emotional health, and my life overall. Not only did it help me heal my body physically, but it also helped me find my path in life, which is where I am today, sharing this information with you all. So what is sacred illness? What is that concept all about? It was sort of a random day in my life where I was doing some research. I don't know what exactly I was looking for, but I came across this research article. It was titled "Sacred Illness, Exploring Transpersonal Aspects in Physical Affliction and the Role of the Body in Spiritual Development." It was written by Ellis Linders and B. Les Lancaster, and it was published in Mental Health, Religion, and Culture in December 2013. This article profoundly changed and shaped a lot of the way that I practice medicine today and how I think about illness. I had already had this experience that my illness was in fact an invitation for me to explore deeper avenues of life, that it was not in fact an end point for me, but an entry point into becoming more authentically myself. It was this article that really put the words sacred illness into my vernacular and really struck me that this is exactly what this is. When we get sick, it is this sacred invitation for us to really tune in and get to know what's going on in our lives. How are we showing up in the world in a way that is not aligned with our highest self? And what do we need to do to get back to that person so that our body can stop holding on to the aspects of self that are being suppressed in the meantime? There was one quote in particular from this article that really struck me, and it reads, "There is a broad consensus that illness holds possibilities for self-transformation and spiritual growth, whereby the disintegration of the sense of self, constructed prior to the onset, may enable a more expanded sense of self to develop. Pivotal to this process is openness to change and a willingness to surrender to what is often experienced as an impulse arising from beyond the parameters of the immediate self. So what this quote really meant to me is that when we get sick, there is this invitation, there's this fork in the road, that we have either this option to go down the typical path of illness where we engage in the typical treatments, the typical recommendations, which are usually not presented to us in the context of healing. It's usually presented in the context of management, suppression, just getting you by, right? Getting you back into your day-to-day life, helping your quality of life improve in the short term. So that's one way we can engage in our illness and our diagnoses. The second path, the one that's outlined and highlighted in this paper, is this possibility for self-transformation and spiritual growth. And the part that really spoke to me was this part that spoke about disintegration of the sense of self, the one that we had constructed prior to getting sick. And the way I began to really think about illness and the way I began to frame illness is that essentially illness is saying everything you've done up until this point that has led to this illness is part of, if not all of, what has led to the construction of this illness. The way you have constructed your sense of self, the way you have moved through the world, the way you think about yourself, the way you think about the world, all of these things in some way, shape, or form, to some extent, are contributing to how you feel physically. And so there is this invitation, again, to pivot, to open ourselves up to change. And as that quote reads, pivotal to this self-transformational process that illness is presenting to us is this willingness to surrender to the unknown, to surrender to a new way of engaging in our body and in healthcare. And this is what makes this work and this path that I teach and that I walked so challenging, is that it's not a path often walked. It is the path less traveled. And yet it is so much more inspirational and transformational and life-giving when we allow ourselves to think of our illness as, again, an invitation to become more fully a human, more fully ourselves, rather than something that is the end of the path. And so I like to think of illness as this, not the thing standing in your way of the life you want, but it is the way. It is the thing giving you the path, the keys, the door, whatever you want to say, the guidebook. It's the thing that's offering you the path that's going to lead to a fuller, more beautiful, more healthy life, should you accept that invitation. And so with that, I present to you the Sacred Illness podcast, in which we will be exploring all of the ways in which illness is this invitation to transform. It is this invitation for you to look more closely at yourself, how to transform yourself, the mind-body connection, how the body holds on to trauma and other such things that leads to chronic illness, how to walk this path of healing, the steps that I walked in order to heal my own body, and so much more. I'm so excited for you to be here. I'm so excited to bring this podcast to the world, and I hope it's as meaningful and powerful for you as it was in my own life.